Untold Physio Stories is part of the all-new PT Podcast Network. Find a new favorite podcast by an amazing PT content creator at ptpodcastnetwork.com. The future of medical documentation is here, and it's revolutionizing the way we record patient visits. Introducing Comprehend PT, the groundbreaking HIPAA-compliant AI scribe designed specifically for physical therapists. Imagine a world where the dialogue between PTs and patients is interpreted by AI into precise, real-time medical notes without lifting a pen or tapping a keyboard. Comprehend PT does just that, allowing healthcare professionals to stay engaged with patients rather than buried in documentation. Boost your efficiency, reduce claim denials, and liberate yourself from the burdens of manual note-taking with Comprehend PT. Join the revolution now at comprehendpt.com. Untold Physio Stories listeners get 50% off their first month with code MMT50, and there's a free trial available. Sign up now. I use it every day in the clinic for virtual and live visits. I just speak to the patient, and at the end, hit Comprehend, and a SOAP note's generated. I love it, and you will too. Welcome to Untold Physio Stories podcast, your perfect commute resource with physio failures, successes, interesting cases, and more from the physio and rehab world, with your hosts, Drs. Andrew Rothschild and Urson Religioso. Welcome back to Untold Physio Stories podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Dr. E, with Modern Manual Therapy, Edge Mobility System, and Modern Rehab Mastery, our 4-month online mentoring program. My co-host, Dr. Andrew Rothschild, is not with me, but today I have a special guest, Dr. Daniel Hirsch. How's it going today, Daniel?
Doing great. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So he has a very unique specialty, and I'll just let him introduce himself, and you can tell us your story or, interesting cases and why you think that every PT or business should really be paying attention to what you have to say.
All right. Awesome. Well, you know what? We spoke a couple weeks ago, and I was really excited because usually I don't get to speak to people that are amazingly skilled and talented like yourself. And I was thinking about, why is compliance such a topic that people not only avoid, but normally they really do not want to give any attention to. And I thought that something that would resonate with a lot of, owners and practice managers and directors is that it's not always about preventing what's right in front of you right now. Just for instance, my background real quick, as a physical therapist, I could tell you, patient care, really, really important. But then when it comes to the other profession that I came from, which is property and casualty insurance, risk management, all these other great things that people usually kind of take for granted and say, hey, by the way, Dr. E, I already have insurance. I already have professional liability with my company. Do I really need my own? All these types of questions that kind of start creeping up, right? That most people are like, maybe I'll Google, maybe I shouldn't trust Google. All these things all of a sudden start coming into focus, I think, when you're leading and when you're directing and when you're owning. So I guess that's why I find this topic so interesting, not only because this is what I do 24/7, right? All I do is focus on therapy and compliance, but also because you get results. And most people, they have this preconceived idea that it's so expensive, it's really cost prohibitive, that it's really not that important. And by the way, you could just do it yourself. And the only thing I agree with is that you probably could do it yourself, but why would you? Because if you want to waste weekends, if you want to spend all your Sundays kind of digging through regulations and laws and statutes and all these great things, I don't know if I can see you're shaking. Maybe you do. I don't know.
No, I don't think anyone does.
But if you want to, fantastic. I'll show you exactly what to do. If you don't, you know what? You don't have to recreate the wheel. And I learned that the hard way, where it was really in my practice, I said, this has to exist. And I don't want to have to sit through a 15-hour lecture. I don't want to have to go ahead and pay an arm and a leg for experts to come in and tell me what to do and then not give me anything on how to actually do it. So I'll give you a couple examples of why this is really important. But at the end of the day, it doesn't matter if you use me or somebody else. You should think of compliance as an offensive weapon, not just reactive. Oh my God, when something comes up, then I'll deal with it. The truth is that when it comes to analysis of prevention, right, it really does pay off. That's the whole purpose of having your car insurance, your property insurance, right? What do you, the great example of the Blind Side movie, right? What do you do when you get that quarterback? You got to protect the quarterback. So same thing with your business. You wouldn't just put all your effort, you get all this, years and years of education. I forget how many courses you told me uh, the first year out that you're knocking out of the ballpark. All these continuing ed, it was some crazy
Yeah, I
number.
don't know.
What
Oh,
was
the
it?
first year, the first 5 years, first 5 years, probably like between 50 and 60 courses.
That's incredible, right? Most people, most states only require, 30 credits for every couple of years or whatever, maybe for CEUs. So you're probably, making someone real happy when it
Well, I
comes to
wish I
CEU.
could bank it. It's not like I was able to bank it.
Right? Can't pay it forward. That's
No.
a great point. But here's an example of why compliance really does pay off. So it's all about prevention. And in my world, when you have to clean up and you have to fix things, just like anything else, it's always more expensive to do it, and it's always more complicated to do it. So, for instance, I love when we talk about incident reports. So, an example that I have is we hear all the time about employees. So, we have employee issues, we have impatience, and oftentimes as owners, we get confused a little bit about where's my loyalty? What do I have to protect? And the answer is, well, you have to protect everything, but you have an equal obligation to your staff as well as to your customers, to your patients, to make sure that they work in a safe environment. We had a case where there was a practice and a staff member was being abused. And it was just something where it was a really hostile work environment, but it wasn't because of the practice. It was because a patient kept coming in on a routine basis and physically and emotionally actually taking advantage of a therapist, where you don't really think of this thing. You don't learn about this in school. This is really something that you would think, hey, by the way, this would never happen. Why would this ever happen? We're a doctorate level profession. We're very well liked as a profession as well. Why would someone want to take advantage of anyone? And the concern was that there was no reporting. There was no ability for this individual that they felt that they could actually report this to their superior, which, even if they were embarrassed by it, the whole point is that it has to be documented. You have to demonstrate that you're doing something to protect your employee. And it became a really, really messy separation, if you will. And it had to go into investigation, and we had to bring in counsel, and it became just a very expensive process. Just that you could have easily had a process in place, such as you fill out an incident report, or you have an anonymous hotline, something that is very, very easy to do, that you immediately identify the exposure or the risk. And again, it was very expensive, because once you start adding up legal fees, this, the clock just starts ticking, right? All of a sudden, all these expenses just start adding up. Another example in terms of what we've been seeing in the
Let
last
me ask,
probably,
oh,
yeah, go ahead.
sorry, my camera
Yeah.
dropped. Let me ask you a quick question though. Did the owner or did the employee end up contacting you? Like, how did this even go about? That
So the owner
you
actually had to contact, yes, because
okay,
they were looking for expertise in this area of risk mitigation, and they didn't want to go
okay,
directly with counsel. Yeah, so they
all
were
right.
looking for someone that had experience in that, like myself. Um, so again, this is something where you don't think, why would this ever happen? But things always happen. There's always things that are happening, and of course, you wouldn't see this on the front page news. You wouldn't, you see these high-profile cases all the time with the Department of Justice, where improper supervision or improper billing, things that we hear about, where people get caught. But the other things that are constantly happening, you're not going to read that in a quarterly report from ATI or USPT, right? These are not things that are going to be reported specifically because they're internal. They don't want to release it. It's very embarrassing too. So this is something that you really, really want to have a phone a friend, or someone that you could actually trust, a trusted resource to say, hey, by the way, what do I do with this? How do I move forward? What process should I put in place? And the answer is, it's very simple. Just do, and we give you tools to actually do this kind of risk mitigation. Um, another incident where we had a audits. We were talking about audits in the last probably about 6 months. Medicare has been very, very aggressive. So I don't know if you know this, Dr. E, but like, it's been across the board. It doesn't matter where you're located. Medicare and other commercial payers are really heavily auditing right now. And in one practice that we were working with, they had a huge error rate. It was a massive error rate, and it became a multi-million-dollar take back. So the the insurance company came in and said, hey, by the way, we're taking back millions of dollars because of X, Y, and Z that we found. They didn't have a process in place to actually screen this in the first hand. So there were preventable things that could have avoided all this chaos and anxiety and a lot of stress for the company. And what we did is we worked overnight one night. We actually got this notice and we said, oh my gosh, we got to deal with this. So we actually went through line by line and we put an entire night's work through. And the next morning we actually appealed the claim and had all the claims actually reversed. And there was millions of dollars that were actually released, but it wasn't just that. It was the consequences that followed. Because what happens, a lot of people don't realize this, is that when you fail audits, your error rate actually dictates what happens next. So just because you think, you know what, it's only a couple $100 or a couple $1,000, I'll just pay it and move on. If you have a significant error rate, you're just coming up next again. So you're just getting replaced on that list again for other either commercial payers, or if it's federal, all the federal payers are all seeing this information. So it's really important that people understand it's not just, hey, by the way, I could just pay this off and just let it go away. But having something in place, that was the whole point, that they didn't have something in place that could have easily prevented these claims that were denied. So again, people make mistakes. I'm a big believer in, it's fine, it's okay. Another example of something that we see a lot is with cyber. So right now, you probably can't go a week without reading something about a cyber incident in the news right now. I think the last one was a large cell phone company who just released, basically all of our information again.
Well, that was a big one, but also Change Healthcare or something that's directly affecting us, right?
Well, it's the largest in U.S. history. Yes, it's massive. Yeah. So we don't even. I mean, this is just the tip of the iceberg. We don't even know, right? We're only a couple months into this, or a couple weeks, whatever it is. It's very recent. We don't even know.
I think it's over a month now.
It's very, very new. So these things usually take months to even actually properly discover. For like forensic auditing, you need a lot of resources to actually go in through and figure out where the exposure is, especially downstream. So what do you do internally? So let's say you're a small mom and pop, or you're mid-size, or even a large. You need processes in place to make sure that your network is secure. So a lot of times, owners or whoever's wearing the compliance hat or the privacy hat, they don't really know what to do if something was released or something accidentally, I gave the wrong record out, or oops, something got stolen out of my car, or oops, right? All these things, you think nothing ever happens. You'd be shocked how many laptops have gone missing on a Friday afternoon when someone walked into, a food store or somewhere. These things happen all the time, and you have to address it really fast.
It does happen. It does happen all the time. Like I get medical record requests for a patient I've never seen before, ever, or I get a DME request for someone I didn't sell something to, or I get someone's records sent to me that I've never seen before.
Right. Luckily, you're a covered entity, so that's usually a good thing. So the problem is it's very timely. The clock literally is ticking when something happens and has to be dealt with immediately. And that's really the strength, where you want someone that is not going to take 3 weeks to get back to you. You need something immediate. And that's not a shameless plug, but that's really where our strength is. We've really, really focused in on being readily available. Whenever someone needs something, we are able to immediately address not just the root cause, but to address what's the severity? What are we actually looking at? What resources do we need to bring in to actually deal with this in a meaningful way? And again, just from a breach, you said yourself, it does happen. And the reporting of it and the financial consequences of it, it just escalates. It just compounds. So do you have to notify your insurance carrier? Do you need cyber insurance? Do you have an umbrella policy? All of these things start coming into play, where if you just simply would have maybe addressed this on a yearly basis, that you simply could go down through a checklist and say, hey, by the way, have I done this? Have I reviewed this? We actually give you the tools to actually do all of this, I don't want to say meaningless, but it's really meaningful, because it will help prevent issues down the road that, again, it's not unforeseeable. These things, of course, they happen. People make mistakes, and we're just people. We deal with patients. Certain, I love the story of they had almost the exact same name. They had the same birthday. It was so easy. You would have made the mistake. I would have made the mistake. And poof, there goes, X amount of number of records to the wrong person. So that's something that we want preventable strategy in place from a risk management standpoint. And again, I think driving costs, a lot of people think this is so expensive. Oh my gosh, I need a whole compliance team. Oh my gosh, I've worked at a large company, or where do I even start? The whole idea is that this should really, really be affordable. The whole argument of like, well, there was a barrier, there was a cost that would prevent me from actually taking the reasonable steps to really have a program in place. Those days, historically, they're gone. So we actually solve that solution for people and actually give them exactly what they need for compliance, just right on demand, which is pretty cool.
Yeah. I mean, when you told me how much, like, I don't know if it was like an audit or a program or information, when you told me how much it cost, I actually couldn't believe it. And I'm not just saying that to plug you, but where can people find you? Because I think this is something that everyone should look into. I used to be a clinical peer reviewer. I used to do those audits, and I know that people just think like, "Oh, I have a great EMR and it generates amazing notes." Well, it might generate amazing notes, but you can still abuse those notes. And I think I told you, Daniel, that I've seen like there was a couple of practices and a couple, one or two providers, in particular in New York City, that I used to audit all the time. And they would always say like, "Why?" Secretaries are always yelling at me like, "Why are you denying their care?" I'm like, literally, this guy copies and pastes every single one of his notes. He generates
Yep.
one good note, and then the next 20 notes are all exactly the same. And I can't. He's not even changing anything. Like I expect minimally 20% change in the note. You know. But and I said like, your EMR doesn't protect you from being audited. Your EMR may generate a nice looking note, and it may include things that an auditor would want to see, but you still have to write information that will prevent you from failing an audit.
Yeah, and Medicare from their mouth actually said that last month on every quarter they do these sessions. So anyone is free to anyone. They don't record them, but every quarter they have a Medicare Part B for PT and OT. The next one's April 11th, I believe. And they actually specifically said that they were really, really dialed in on these templates and these forward options that EMRs are strategizing right now. And they really, really are enforcing this copy forward nonsense that they're saying, just because you wrote, to your point, a really great note one day, it has to be unique to show and demonstrate medically necessary services on every single visit. And if you're just copying that, it doesn't show. You're not proving that. And it has to be meaningful. Anything that you create, back to my original point of like, you could really do this on your own. If you really had the time and you really had the motivation to do this, more power to you. But a lot of times people, this is not why they went to PT school. They really did not go into the whole regulatory aspect of, you know what, I really love writing policies, or I really love reviewing HIPAA standards. The idea is that you value your time. You want actionable solutions as opposed to just nice ideas. So we actually give the tools and the resources, which is so unique, that has never existed, where there's never been anything for therapy, either professional, so it could be like compliance people like myself who are using this, or owners. They simply could actually, you want to, as an example, you want to expand your practice into home health. We actually give you the home health audit to say, hey, by the way, do you have what you need to be actually providing the service? Or you need a certain waiver or consent form. All these things that normally you'd be like, I'll just wing it, or I'm hoping someone else will deal with it, or I can't afford this, or all the excuses in the book. The answer is there really is no more excuse to not have exactly what you need, and that's the purpose, because we've had enough of we've had a really rough ride for the last couple of years coming out of COVID, that I feel like pay cuts and all the other challenges for the industry, this should not be one of them. And that was why I think we really hit it off, especially when we first met, that we really want the profession to move forward without the baggage, so to speak, right? We don't want people bogged down on just the nonsense. We want people to say, hey, by the way, I know what I need and I know where to get it. And in the past, you didn't really have that. So that's why this has been a long time coming.
Yeah, well, I mean, you're definitely serving a need that I think no one else wants to do. Someone's got to enjoy it. You have a passion for it. But I mean, so how do people find your services? I'll put it in the show notes too.
Yeah, no problem. So they could go directly to my website. It's riskandcomplianceanalytics.com. And the whole idea is you don't want just something off the shelf. So the OIG has made it very, very clear. They don't look kindly on just, when people tell me they took training and I'm like, oh, how was it? Like, I don't know. I don't remember. Like that it wasn't good training. You want something that's
You're right. Like every training I've ever been through.
Right. It's terrible. You want something that's operationally practical. And that's exactly where our focus is. We actually give people the tools to be operationally very successful, as opposed to just saying, you know what, here's another barrier, here's another challenge, here's another issue that you could do. No, we actually tell you how to deal with it and how to thrive with these different challenges that every owner has to deal with. So we're trying to really remove the hat from whoever's dealing with all the chaos right now that they have to, and it's sometimes state specific. So as you know, depending on where you are, you have either medical record rules and regulations that you have to follow that are unique. You need to know exactly what applies to you, and that's exactly what we offer.
All right. Well, hopefully you don't need his services, but even if you don't currently need his services, you do need his services because you don't want to need his services in the future. So I think you should definitely, if you're a practice owner or even if you're an employee who potentially, like in his story, need his services, hit him up. All this information, how to contact Dr. Daniel Hirsch, will be in the show notes. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to give us a 5-star rating on Spotify and Apple, especially those two. That helps with our SEO and our show discovery. And hit that subscribe button. As always, you guys have a great day.